I know that there's some in the White House who feel Wall Street reform, healthcare legislation, stimulus, and yet the public still overwhelmingly thinks this country's on the wrong track. Are you not getting enough credit, you and the administration?
Look, these are gigantic packages to deal with a gigantic problem we inherited. And the vast majority of the American people, and a lot of people really involved, don't even know what's inside the packages. And so you have, for example, Mr. Boehner already calling for the repeal of the reform that just passed on Wall Street. People don't realize in that reform, you say, look, we've had meat inspection for 100 years ago. The meat packing companies didn't like it. Automobile safety 50 years ago. People are going to look back on this very shortly and say, why shouldn't we have some consumer group entity looking at whether or not you can give someone a mortgage with no down payment, with a teaser interest rate, with no documentation, et cetera. So it is, people don't know that. Just like people don't know a lot of what's going on in the Recovery Act, understandably, because this has been so much stuff has been flowing our way. And we're facing a bunch of guys who are good guys, but they're all about repeal and repeat. And repeal what we're doing and go back, repeal the incentives for industry to invest in solar energy, repeal the health care bill that allows you to keep your kid on your health care policy, pre-existing conditions can't deny you policies, etc. It's just going to take time. This is July. The election's not till November, and I think we're going to have to affirmatively make our case. I think we can make it, and especially in the context of who's going to be opposing us. Compared to the alternative, I think we're going to get a fair amount of credit by November, and I think we're going to do fine.
So the reason you're not getting enough credit is because the public doesn't understand everything that's happened yet?
Well, nor could they or should they. I mean, in the last 6 months of the Bush administration, they lost 3 million jobs. Before we got our economic package in place, another 3.7 million jobs were lost in the first 6 months we took office. The last 6 months of this year, the first 6 months of this year, we created almost 600,000 private jobs in the private market. That's not nearly enough to make up for the 8 million jobs lost in the recession. But people are going to start to focus on exactly what we're doing. And look, I'm convinced, at least from sitting around my dad's kitchen table and the people I grew up with, is when things are really tough economically and the country's in trouble, all they want to know is they don't expect an answer, but they expect to be reassured that we're moving in the right direction. But
they don't think that we are.
No, they don't think now because I don't think they know the detail of what's going on. For example, here you had the insurance industry spending hundreds of millions of dollars to make the health care bill out to be this god-awful tragedy. Now what's starting to happen? The health care numbers are going up. Why? Because they're figuring out that small businesses are going to get a 30% tax cut. They didn't know that because of all the advertising done. So there's a lot, and I would use healthcare as an example. Healthcare has gone from a barrage of advertising against it, why it was so bad, just like Wall Street reform. The financial industry spent hundreds of millions of dollars lobbying against this. This is an awful thing. It's government regulation. All it is rational control and a turning around of what the Republicans did, which is let Wall Street run wild. People, when you say to people, we just went out and had a regulatory reform bill. Where I come from, it's like, okay, what does that mean? They don't know what it means yet, understandably. And so I think it takes time, Jake.
There's that famous saying in Washington by Mike Kinsley that a gaffe is when a politician accidentally tells the truth. Robert Gibbs experienced some of that this past few days.
I've never had a gaffe.
You've never had an issue with gaffes. No, I know. So you can't relate. But he said that enough seats are in play in the House for the Democrats to possibly lose the House. Empirically true. How bad are the losses going to be for Democrats?
I don't think the loss can be bad at all. I think we're going to shock the heck out of everybody. And I've been saying this now, I think even when you and I went down to North Carolina, you followed me on a recovery trip. I was saying it then. I am absolutely confident when people take a look at what has happened since we've taken office in November and comparing it to the alternative, we're going to be in great shape. Here's the deal. What Robert Gibbs also said was what he believes, what I believe, what the President believes. We're going to win the House, and we're going to win the Senate. We're not going to lose either one of those bodies. And so, again, this is July, November, and at the time, the most vulnerable time any public official finds himself in is when they have no opponent. Look at Harry Reid. You know, I got kind of banged around for saying I think there's a 55% chance Harry Reid's going to win. Well, Harry Reid, when he was on the other side of the barrage of how bad Harry Reid was in trouble. Now Harry Reid, the last poll's up 7 points. I think I bet anything. I'm not allowed to bet, but I'll bet Harry Reid wins. You're going to see that repeated. So to paraphrase Mark Twain, I think the reports of our demise are premature.
The NAACP had a convention in the last week, and they passed a resolution saying that elements of the Tea Party are racist. Do you think elements of the Tea Party are racist?
Well, the truth is that at least elements that were involved in some of the Tea Party folks expressed racist views. I saw that on television. It was turned, but I wouldn't characterize the Tea Party as racist. There are individuals who are either members of or in the periphery of some of their things, their protests, that have expressed really unfortunate comments. And again, it was all over TV, all over your network, black congressman walking up the stairs of the Capitol. But I don't believe, the President doesn't believe, that the Tea Party is a racist organization. I don't believe that. Very conservative, very different views on government and a whole lot of things, but it is not a racist organization.
One of the big issues in this election, in this midterm election, is the economy.
Yep.
Non-financial institutions are sitting on $1.8 trillion in cash money that could be spent expanding, creating jobs, and they're not spending it that way. A lot of members of the business community in the last week or so have been saying the reason that money's not being spent on expansion or jobs is because the business community is convinced that the Obama administration is anti-business, and they're worried about what legislation, what regulation is coming down the pike. Why do you think they're not spending that money?
3 months ago, those same business leaders, they were in the White House in meetings with us saying, you're going to be surprised on the upside how many people we're going to be hiring. I think a couple things have happened. One, they didn't anticipate, and no one anticipated, the potential collapse of the European economy in the so-called Eurozone, Greece and Spain and all that. That put a real brake on an awful lot of people in terms of their optimism about where the world economy was going, because we're affected by that indirectly. Secondly, I think that the very uncertainty they had is now been settled by the passage of the reforms. They didn't know which way they were going to go. They didn't know how much was going to happen. So I think there is increased certainty now that the major reform they were worried about is law. It's passed, and they're going to know how to deal with it. I think you see stabilization on the European side in terms of the so-called euro and the eurozone, and I think that's going to help. So I think you're going to see them beginning to move.
You said that the stimulus is working.
Yeah.
And you said earlier in the past week you've talked about 3 million jobs being created by the stimulus so far. But since the stimulus passed, more than 3 million jobs have been lost. And before you took office, 3 million jobs were lost. Was the stimulus, in retrospect, too small?
Look, there's a lot of people at the time argued it was too small. Actually,
a lot of people in your administration.
Yeah, a lot of people in our administration. Even some Republican economists and some Nobel laureates like Paul Krugman, who continues to argue it was too small. But there was a reality. In order to get what we got passed, we had to find Republican votes, and we found three, and we finally got it passed. So there is the reality of whether or not the Republicans are willing to play, whether or not the Republicans are just about repeal and repeat the old policies, or they're really wanting to do something. And I'm not.
So if you didn't have Republicans if you didn't have the legislative reality, it would have been bigger.
I think it would have been bigger. In fact, what we offered was slightly bigger than that. But the truth of the matter is that the recovery package, everybody's talking about it it's over. The truth is now, we're spending more now this summer. I'm calling this the summer of recovery. We have 2-3 times as many highway projects going. We have significant investment in broadband for the first time now. It's starting to really ramp up because the contracts have been let. In high-speed rail, in wind energy. I mean, where are the new jobs going to come from? And that's what we're laying the foundation for. And again, this is a hard slog, man. And it's counterintuitive. It's counterintuitive to say someone sitting at a kitchen table in Claymont, Delaware, who lost their jobs, by the way, we saved or created 3 million jobs, and they pick up and we lost 3 million. The truth is, over 3 million people who are now working would be out of work but for this. The truth of the matter is there's an overwhelming consensus that we're not losing jobs now, we're creating jobs. The argument's gone from losing jobs to are we creating them fast enough, not whether we're creating them. And nothing's fast enough till you get these people back to work.